Bee Gees in the wake of tragedy and sad ending. Relying on their top-notch songwriting and impeccable vocals, the Bee Gees were able to craft a long-running career that began in the late 50s in Australia. Along the way they became a hit-producing psychedelic pop group in England during the 60s and the biggest disco band in the world in the 70s, and had a late comeback as adult contemporary crooners in the 90s. Their long-reaching influence extended past sales figures and saw their sound and style mirrored in acts as disparate as Justin Timberlake and of Montreal. The group was also music's most successful brother act. Barry Gibb, born on September 1, 1946, in Manchester, England, and his fraternal twin brothers Robin Gibb and Maurice Gibb, born on December 22, 1949, on the Isle of Man, were three of 5 children. The three of them gravitated toward music, encouraged by their father, who saw his sons at first as a diminutive version of the Mills brothers. The three Gibb brothers made their earliest performances at local movie theaters in Manchester in 1955, singing between shows. The family moved to Australia in 1958, resettling near Brisbane. Now known as the Brothers Gibb, with Barry writing songs, they attracted the attention of a local DJ, and eventually got their own local television show. It was around this time that they took on the name the Bee Gees. The trio was astoundingly popular in the press and on television, but actual hit records eluded them. By late 1966, they decided to return to England, which, thanks to the Beatles, was now the center of the world for rock and popular music. The group had sent demo recordings ahead of them, and Spicks and Specks, which became their first Australian hit while they were in mid-ocean, had attracted the interest of manager Robert Stigwood. The trio was signed by Stigwood upon their arrival, and began shaping their sound in the environment of swinging London. Barry and Robin Gibb alternated the lead vocal spot, harmonizing together and with Maurice. It was easy, amid the sheer beauty of their recordings, to overlook the range of influences that went into their sound, which came from a multitude of sources, including American country music and soul music. At this point in their history, they were most comfortable deconstructing elements in the singing and harmonies of Black American music and rebuilding them in their style. In 1969, the trio split up in a dispute involving the Odessa album. A lushly orchestrated double LP, it was their most ambitious recording to date, but they were unable to agree on which song would be the single, and Robin walked out. Barry and Maurice held on to the Bee Gees name for one LP, Cucumber Castle, while Robin released Robin's Reign. In 1970, almost 2 years older and a good deal wiser, they decided to get back together. They related to each other better and had also evolved musically, now creating a progressive pop, rock sound similar to the Moody Blues. They came back on a high note with 2 dazzling songs. The soulful Lonely Days, the group's first #1 hit in America, and the achingly lyrical Morning of My Life, which proved so popular with fans that the group was still doing it in concert decades later. Their success began to ebb, however, after another huge international hit with How Can You Mend a Broken Heart in 1971. The single Run to Me made the top 20 in 1972, but the album To Whom It May Concern was forgotten almost instantly after a brief chart run. Their fortunes continued in reverse during 1973 with Life in a Tin Can, and the single saw a new morning. Despite a move to America and a heavy promotional push, the song never made the top 40 and the album stalled out. The trio was falling into a deep creative and commercial hole. Rescue came from a suggestion by Eric Clapton that they try recording at Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida, where he had just cut an album. In the process, the disco era in America was born. Saturday Night Fever, as an album and a film, supercharged the phenomenon and broadened its audience by tens of millions, with the Bee Gees at the forefront of the music. It was a profound moment, although, ironically, there wasn't that much difference in their sound. Amid the dance numbers, the Bee Gees still did a healthy portion of romantic ballads that each offered memorable hooks. They'd simply decided, at Arif Martin's urging, to forget the fact that they were white Englishmen and plunged into soul music, emulating, in their own terms, the funkier Philadelphia soul sounds that all three brothers knew and loved. In one fell swoop, the group had managed to meld every influence they'd ever embraced, from the Mills Brothers and the Beatles to early 70s soul, into something of their own that was virtually irresistible. Spirits Having Flown was their crowning commercial triumph, topping 30 million in sales and yielding 3 more #1 singles. By the end of the 70s, however, the disco era was waning from a combination of the bad economy, political chaos domestically and internationally. There had already been an ad hoc reaction against the group's dominance of the airwaves, with mass burnings of Bee Gees posters and albums organized by DJs. The Bee Gees themselves helped contribute to the end of the party with their participation in the film Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, inspired by the Beatles album. The movie was a commercial and critical disaster, and an embarrassment to all concerned. In America, the Bee Gees were virtually invisible for most of the 80s. Instead, Barry Gibb pursued work as a producer for other artists, creating hits for Barbra Streisand and Diana Ross. By 1987 and the ESP album, their sales had rebounded everywhere but the United States, yielding a #1 single, outside of the U.S., in You Win Again. Their 1989 album, One, got a good reception around the world and generated a top 10 U.S. single. And in the 90s, Polygram Records released the 4-CD anthology Tales from the Brothers Gibb, which sold well around the world. The trio's 1997 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame led to a resurgence of interest, which heralded the release of the live album One Night Only, 1998, cut at their first American concert in almost a decade. The Bee Gees remained active until the January 2003 death of Maurice from cardiac arrest during surgery. Following his death, Robin and Barry decided to cease performing as the Bee Gees. Their recorded legacy, however, subsequently became more visible than it had been in decades with the move of their catalog to Warner, Reprise. Robin was diagnosed with and underwent treatment for cancer in 2011. He died in London in May 2012 due to complications from cancer and intestinal surgery. He was 62 years old. Given the previous deaths of Andy and Maurice Gibb, Robin was the third Gibb brother and second member of the Bee Gees to pass away. In the wake of tragedy, Barry kept working, appearing on other people's records, playing concerts, and releasing a solo album titled In the Now in 2016. The next year the Bee Gees were honored at the 2017 Grammys. Then their music was featured in the star-studded concert Stayin' Alive, a Grammy salute to the music of the Bee Gees, which was broadcast by CBS in April. Thank you so much for watching.